Hello, everyone. Today we're going to continue our working on our color project. And as you remember last time, we added this text field here. And if we type the name of the color, so for example, red, and then click move slider, it'll move the red slider. If we type green, moves the green slider. And if we type blue, it moves the blue slider. And if we type something else, it'll move all sliders at once. Now, we did all of this using this if-else block. But there's another way of doing it, and that's using the switch statement. So this is, hold on. This is what a switch statement looks like. In here, in these brackets, we have the value or the expression that we compare to several different options. And here, if any of the cases is true, if a case is true, then so this is equal to this case, then it'll do the code after it. However, if neither of the cases are true, then it'll go to the default case and do the default code. Now, if we refresh this page, yeah, I saved it. If we save and run this, and type red, then it'll move the red slider, but then it'll move the green slider as well, and then the blue slider, and then after it'll move all sliders at once, which is not what we want to do. And the reason it does that is because our switch here, it first compares this value or expression to all the cases. And then if one of the cases is true, so for example, we type red and this is equal to red, then it will just start from here and do all the code in the switch block until the very end. So in our case, when we typed red, it would do this for loop, then do this for loop, and then this for loop, which is not what we want to do. Luckily, there's a command called break. And what this command does is if the program reaches this break, then the switch will exit and not do the code that's after it. So in our case, if the color.value is equal to red, then it will start doing this for loop. And then once it's done, it's going to go to this line. And then once it reaches this, it will exit the switch without moving all the other sliders as well. Now I'm going to add a break to these two cases. And we're not going to add a break to the default case because after this for loop is done, it's going to exit the switch regardless because it's at the very end. We don't put breaks after these cases, the uppercase red, uppercase green, and uppercase blue, because we want both of these cases to start here at this for loop and do this for loop. Now, if we save and refresh this web page, typing red will only move the red slider. Red with an uppercase works as well. green moves the green slider only, and blue moves the blue slider only. And typing something else moves all sliders at once, like so. Now, what is the difference between using switches and using an if-else block like we used previously? Switches are used when you have a single value or expression that you need to check for several options, which are either a text or a number. So for example, here we check the value of a text field for several different string values, and we have a default case. However, in switches, you cannot do complex logical conditions or check several values at once. So for example, in our if-else block, we not only check the value of the text field, we also check the value of the red slider. And we also have a complex logical condition here with these logical operators, which cannot be done using a switch. So in other words, anything you can do with a switch statement, you can do using an if-else block, but not everything that you can do with an if-else block can be done using a switch statement. Now, if we go here, this is the program that we made in Microbit last time. What it does is when we press the A button, it triggers this event handler, this here, which just increments I, event checks the value of I, and depending on its value, it shows the appropriate icon. So if it's 1, shows a heart. If it's 2, shows a square. If it's 3, shows no. If it's 4, shows yes. Event if neither of these conditions are true. So for example, I is equal to 5. It will clear the screen. Event it will set I to 0. So next time we click on it, I is 1, and pretty much just repeats the cycle. Now, there's another way of doing it, and that's using a switch statement. And it will look like so. The only thing that really changed here is instead of our if-else block, we just have a switch where we pass the variable I, the value of the variable I. And if it's 1, we show a heart. If it's 2, we show a square. If it's 3, we show no. If it's 4, we show yes, just like in our previous program. And for default, if it's neither of these, it just clears the screen and sets I to 0. Now, if we go into blocks, you'll notice that the switch is grayed out, and that is because Microbit does not know how to convert this JavaScript code into blocks, and that is because the switch block does not exist in the block mode of Microbit. The program still works though, so if we click the button, it still switches through all the icons. However, if you really don't like the way these grayed out blocks look, you should probably stay away from switch statements. Now, if we change it back to JavaScript, the only thing that really changed in here was the event handler was placed in front of the declaration of a variable I. This here, as we discussed previously, is pretty much the same thing as ++i. But in here, with his declaration at the bottom, it still works because first this event handler is registered, and then I is set to 0. And then when the actual event handler is triggered, I is declared, so it doesn't throw any errors. However, there's another and even easier way to do this using something called arrays. In order to do that, in order to demonstrate how arrays work, I'm going to paste this code here. So what is an array? An array is a special type of variable, which is pretty much like a list. So here we have a variable called icons, and it is an array. So an array is like a list which holds several different values. And then you can access any of these values in an array using an index. Like so, like in here. The index is just a number which represents the position of a certain item in the array. So for example, this item here, it's the first item in the array. So its index is 0. In JavaScript, we start counting from 0. The second element in the array is 1. The third is 2. And the fourth element is 3. And now in here, the index, for the index, you can just put any variable or expression, as long as the end result of this is a number, and it can actually pull the required element from the array. So in here, this array, icons, here we declare the array by using square brackets and separate the values with commas. And this array stores 4 icons in it: heart, square, no, and yes. Now when we press the button, we call the show icon function, but the input parameter is the element of the array icons with this index here. So the first time we click on the button, I is set to 0, so it will show the element with the index 0, which is this element here, the heart icon. Right after that, it was incremented by 1. And now next time we click on it, I is equal to 1, so it shows this icon here, because this icon has an index of 1. Next, it shows icon with index of 2, which is this. And then right after that, it shows the icon with this index here. Now, after that, I was incremented by 1, so now I is equal to 4. But then, right now, I is greater than 3, so then it was reset to I equals 0. And now if we click on it again, it will show element 0 once again. And this continues indefinitely. Arrays can be used in the microbit ORC challenge quite a lot, and they'll be really useful because in the microbit challenge, you need to have several melodies and icons that you need to switch through in your program. And probably the most efficient way of doing this is writing all of these melodies and icons as elements in their respectful arrays. And then you can just switch through them pretty much like we do in here. Now, if we go into blocks, this is what the program looks like in blocks. As you notice here, arrays are actually supported in microbit blocks. However, these icons are all grayed out because microbit, for some reason, does not recognize them. However, if we click, we can add numbers or text variables in the array, and microbit will have no problem recognizing them, like so. Another block that's grayed out here is the show icon block. And usually the show icon block will look like this, show icon function. However, in the input parameter, instead of having a predefined icon like so, we have an element of the array an array, which it doesn't recognize, and so it cannot convert this properly into blocks. The program works regardless though, so if we click the A button, everything works the same way. Now, if we switch back into JavaScript, once again, this code here was placed at the bottom, which doesn't really change much. And then this changed. Actually, this was already I plus equals 1, but microbit does not like the I plus plus or plus plus I form. Now, there is actually a hack which makes predefined icon changing process on microbit even more simple. So here, I'm going to paste some code like so. In here, we got rid of the array, and we just have variable I. And in our event handler, we call basic.showIcon, and then we put the variable I, and here we still increment I by 1, and if I is greater than 39, it resets I. And now if we run this code and press the A button, it will start showing icons, and it will go through all 40 predefined icons in microbit before resetting. Now, the reason this works is because the icons in microbit are actually enumerators, or part of an enumerator. So here, if we hover over it, this icon names is in enum, or which is short for enumerator. So what is an enumerator? An enumerator is essentially just a number. And here we can create our own enumerator. I'll create it so that it's easier to show what they do. So here we created our own enumerator. And the way this works is, in an enumerator, all the elements are numbered. So in order to show this, I'm going to remove this logic here. And I'm going to show number, and then color.red. Okay, this works. So it numbers all of the elements of this enumerator. The first one being 0, and every next element is increased by 1. So here it goes like color.red should be 0, color.green should be 1, and color.blue should be 2. So in here, color.red, when we click the A button, shows 0 because color.red is 0. Color.green should be 1, and it is. And color.blue should be 2. And so the same kind of logic works with the show icon function. So this icon names is an enumerator, and it has 40 different elements, each with a different name. But they are all just numbers. And for that reason, when we just inputted a number, our variable I, into the show icon function, it still worked fine. Now, if we take this code that we have here and switch to blocks, Microbit does not recognize enumerators in the block mode, and so they are grayed out. The program still works as usual. And enumerators are actually not part of standard JavaScript. So if we copy this line and paste it in our JavaScript code here, then refresh the page, we should get an error in the console because there are no enumerators in JavaScript. Although they do exist in Java and C++ if you're going to be coding in those languages. However, arrays exist in both Microbit and standard JavaScript. So here, I'm actually going to make an array called array test, and the values in an array aren't limited to any type. They can be anything. They can be numbers, they can be text, they can be Boolean, pretty much any other variable type we talked about. They can even be objects or even other arrays. So here for this array, we're going to add another line of code. We're going to log the value of this array in the console. When we refresh the page, the console.log prints out the value of this array. And in Firefox Development Edition, you can actually see all the values of at each index of the array. So in here, the value of element with the index 0 is 1. So first element is 1. Element with index 1 is 3.1416. So the second element is this, which is true. So element with index 2 is red, which is true. And now element with index 3 is true, which is correct. And it also says the length of the array. So the array is 4 long. It has 4 elements, and it does. Now, this is all that I want to explain for today. And this actually concludes our fundamentals of JavaScript. And starting from next session, we're going to be focused more on coding in Microbit and preparing for the ORC Microbit Challenge. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right, then this is it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, everyone.